Welcome back to the channel. In today's video we are moving on to the next episode in the category breakdown series, and in this video we are taking a look at Best Documentary Feature. And as always, if you're new to this series, there is a playlist with all the previous episodes in the series if you want to go back and check my thoughts on any of the other categories. But basically, if you're new, all this is just in every single one of these videos, we're going to take a look at a different category at the upcoming Academy Awards. We're going to talk about all of the nominees, and in these categories, specifically the people that are nominated, the producers or the directors that are nominated with the film. Talk a little bit about those nominees, talk about my feelings about the film in general, and then at the end I'll give you my personal ranking and my prediction for how likely it is that I think they win the Academy Award on March 2nd. So without further ado, let's take a look at the nominees. The first nominee is Box Diaries. Journalist Shiori Ito embarks on a courageous investigation of her own sexual assault in an improbable attempt to prosecute her high-profile offender. Her quest becomes a landmark case in Japan, exposing the country's outdated judicial and societal systems. This is the first Oscar nomination for both Shiori Ito and Hannah Akvilin. This is Eric Niari's second Oscar nomination. He was also nominated this year in the documentary short category for Instruments of a Beating Heart. Box Diaries was also nominated for Best Documentary at the BAFTAs. Now, oftentimes in the documentary category, this is a category that I think if you're a fan of documentaries, like obviously you're going to love the category, but if you're not necessarily all the way, like if you're like me, where you're not always bought into documentaries, like it isn't your favorite thing to go out and watch, sometimes you may be a little bit more hesitant and a little cautious kind of coming into the documentary category, because usually, and this year is no exception, it's a lot of really tough watches. It's a lot of hard, serious subject matter, and it's very kind of just draining watching a lot of documentaries because of how serious and how real it all is. And again, like I said, this year specifically, it's not like an exception to that. All the documentaries here, they're hard watches because it is such serious and upsetting subject matter. And typically, what you'll get is you'll get a lot of documentaries. Typically, you'll get a lot of kind of war documentaries, which is kind of something you have a little bit here. But you'll get a lot of those, or you'll get these big documentaries about persecution of like a large group of people. And I would say that three of the four probably in this category, or three of the other four are definitely that. One of them is like, it's not maybe the most massive thing, but it is still multiple people affected. Box Diaries is interesting because it is a documentary made by the so, and again, apologies, I'm probably butchering all of the names in this category, but Shiori Ito she's making her own film exploring her own sexual assault, how she was assaulted. And so it is this is the film in this category that's a very intimate and a very kind of personal and open, like she is open with us, kind of showing and documenting her journey, and as she is trying to get this case prosecuted, and the issues and the roadblocks that she's facing and everything that's happening. And as you're getting towards the end of the film, when anytime there is good news or kind of progress in the case, something kind of happens, and then all of a sudden, it's one step forward, two steps back type thing, where there's just a roadblock every single time as she's getting closer and closer to getting justice on her own sexual assault case. And so it is, this documentary is interesting in that sense of it's a film that you're able to watch, and as opposed to some of the other films where it just kind of feels like the weight of so much going on, and this is a grand, wide-scale story that needs to be told. This really is just kind of, it's one person being honest and being vulnerable, and you getting kind of to share that experience with them. And again, like I said, it is a lot of the documentaries, they're usually saddening and they're frustrating, and this is one where, as the film is going on, you can still see Shiori Ito. She is still, you can tell that she's just a positive person, and is there's so many scenes of her with like either her family or friends, or just whoever she's with, where she's kind of joking and cracking a smile, and kind of helps bring some levity to the situation, and is able to kind of make it feel like you're watching. It's weird to say like you're rooting for someone, because you should just be rooting for people getting justice in these type of situations. So it's like, obviously you're rooting for it, but it's weird to say you're rooting for someone in like a real life thing. But you care for her so much as you're watching this documentary, because of just the type of person she is, and you see everything that's going on, and you're feeling kind of the pain, and you're feeling the struggles that she's going through. as her case becomes one of the shocking or one of the real saddening things in the documentary is there's a moment where her case, like the description says, it starts to become a little bit of a high profile case in Japan, and people start recognizing her and are recognizing her as the girl who was sexually assaulted. And so there's just these moments where it's just, you feel so bad, like it hits you, and I think that is a sign of a good documentary, to get you to really, no matter what the subject is, to get you to passionately care about it. And Black Box Diaries does an excellent job of that. So for my personal ranking, I'm putting Black Box Diaries in second, and for my prediction, I'm putting it in third. The next nominee is No Other Land. This film, made by a Palestinian-Israeli collective, shows the destruction of the occupied West Bank's Masafer Yatta by Israeli soldiers and the alliance which develops between the Palestinian activist Basil and Israeli journalist Yuval. This is the first Oscar nomination for all four of Basil Adra, Rachel Soar, Hamdan Bilal, and Yuval Abraham. No Other Land was also nominated for Best Documentary at the BAFTAs. Now, No Other Land is one that doesn't currently have real distribution in terms of like a streaming release or anything in North America. I was fortunate that there were some showtimes playing. There's a local kind of art house theater, I guess you could say, that does a lot of like independent films and documentaries and international films and stuff here. So I was able to find a showtime to go see this. And I will be open, and I'll in this film I'll also talk about how one of my best friends is Palestinian, and being able to, I went and saw this film with him, and kind of going in knowing that like I was going to be affected, I was going to be emotional. I knew this was going to be a very impactful film. I already went in knowing that, and there was just something extra sharing that experience with my friend. And I think the biggest thing is, kind of leaving the theater, and we had, I say it's this local theater. It's good, probably 45 minutes to an hour from where we live, but so we had a long car ride home. And on the car ride home, we just had this entire car ride where we're talking, and he's sharing some of his experiences and sharing, his extended family. He has some extended family out there, kind of hearing, and the stories that he's been telling for years, that we've heard about. He's very open with his situation and with his family, and so having this experience of kind of driving and talking to him and just hearing all of this really puts into perspective a couple things for me with No Other Land that really affected me. And the thing that I think that really got to me is seeing this, and this is what you're watching here, is enough to be outraged, and it is enough to, again, feel saddened by what is happening to the Palestinian people here in this area in the Western Bank. Masafer Yatta, again, I'm sure I'm butchering the pronunciations, but the entire time I was watching this film thinking, like, this alone is tragic, and this is so upsetting, and this is saddening. And then you realize this is just one group of people. This is just one story for a conflict that has so many different people, the Palestinian people that are affected, and that are being displaced, and they're being their homes are being taken away from them. They're essentially being cleansed, from the land that they're in, and they're just kind of being wiped out. And ultimately, you see a couple times in this film, couple instances of them being murdered, for being here in this land, and for no other reason other than essentially just to kind of cleanse them and get rid of them from this land. There is just so many things about this film, again, that are just so sad, and they're so, that just got to me. But it solely was the entire thing of watching this and realizing that this isn't even the whole story. And the other thing that I was talking with my friend, and we both had the same realization when we were watching the film, because I mean, he didn't know, but I knew about how long the documentary was when I went into it. And so I'm sitting there watching, and you can kind of, when you watch a lot of movies, you can kind of, you get an internal clock. You can kind of feel the beats. You can feel when, even in a documentary that doesn't necessarily follow as many beats as a film does, you can still kind of get the idea of, we're getting close to wrapping this up. And it's getting toward the end of the film, and I kept thinking, we're not even to like the present day, like what's really been going on, in just not only this area, but just, again, with the Palestinian people. And it gets to that end at the end of the film kind of ends where all of a sudden it's really gotten worse since the end of their documentary. And so it's this idea of this documentary, the beginning of the film, Yuval kind of, or I guess it's Basil is kind of joking with him, saying like, you're trying to just get an instant fix and you're trying to fix everything instantly. And he mentions that this is a conflict and this is things that's been going on for decades. Like this isn't just a lot of people, I think, have are newly familiar with what's going. It's something that's kind of gotten, the news cycle has gotten bigger over the last couple year or so. But this is not just something that's new. This isn't some new conflict that's going on. This is a extended thing that has been going on for quite a while. And to have this documentary that feels like we're starting at like the it feels like you're maybe 80%, 90% into like everything that's happened before is like so much of what's happened, and you're getting this one little moment and it looks awful and this is everything that's happening is saddening, it's disgusting, and then it just kind of ends before it gets even worse. I think is just something that for me, really, No Other Land does an effective job of really kind of portraying this group of people, portraying their stories, and really kind of getting you to, again, and I think that's part of the kind of the one of the quotes they say at the end of the film, of talking about how why the reason they were making this is they wanted to have it be seen. They want people to see it. If you're able to see what's happening, you can become more sympathetic as a person, and hopefully try and do something, if you have any sort of power, to be able to make the changes in order to help, or to do assist in any way that you can. And for them to have this idea, this goal, this aspiration of trying to get it seen by as many people, and then still have so many more horrors after when you're not filming anymore. It's just, the entire thing was just, I mean, it is saddening. And I the entire time watching it with my buddy, just hoping that someday we do have, we can free all the Palestinian people that just trying to live their lives and just have a free Palestine, have a free country where they can honestly just be respected as human beings. Like, hopefully that is a thing, that someday we can get to that point. And again, this is just in a category where there are so many films that are just hard to watch or hard to sit with because of how much they impact you emotionally. This really is at the top of the list for me. So for my personal ranking, I'm putting No Other Land in first, and for my prediction, I'm putting it in first. The next nominee is Porcelain War. Under roaring fighter jets and missile strikes, Ukrainian artists Slava, Anya, and Andriy choose to stay behind and fight, contending with the soldiers they have become. Defiantly finding beauty amid destruction, they show that although it's easy to make people afraid, it's hard to destroy their passion for living. This is the first Oscar nomination for all four of Brendan Belomo, Slava Leontiev, Anila Sidorowska, and Paula Dupree-Pesman. Porcelain War won for Best Documentary Direction at the DGA Awards. Porcelain War currently doesn't have distribution in the United States, so barring a miracle, this will be the only Oscar-nominated film I don't get to see before Sunday's ceremony. For that reason, I'm not going to give a personal ranking. However, due to the success it has had, I think it has a good shot at winning the Oscar, so without seeing the film, I still feel confident at putting it in second in my prediction. The next nominee is Soundtrack to a Coup d'etat. Jazz and decolonization are intertwined in a powerful narrative that recounts one of the tensest episodes of the Cold War. In 1960, the UN became the stage for a political earthquake as the struggle for independence in the Congo put the world on high alert. The newly independent nation faced its first coup d'etat, orchestrated by Western forces and Belgium, which were reluctant to relinquish control over their resource-rich former colony. The U.S. tried to divert attention by sending Jazz Ambassador Louis Armstrong to the African continent. In 1961, Congolese leader Patrice Lumumba was brutally assassinated, silencing a voice in the fight against colonialism. His death was facilitated by Belgian and CIA operatives. Musician Abbey Lincoln and Max Roach took action, denouncing imperialism and structural racism. Soviet Premier Nikita Khrushchev intensified his criticism of the U.S., highlighting the racial barriers that characterized American society. This is the first Oscar nomination for Johann Grimenprez and Don Milius. This is Remy Gredley's second Oscar nomination. He was also nominated in 2017 for I Am Not Your Negro. Soundtrack to a Coup d'etat was also nominated for Best Documentary Direction at the DGA Awards. And I think Soundtrack to a Coup d'etat, I think, is going to be a great kind of litmus test, I guess, if you like documentaries or not. If you like documentaries, I could see this being your favorite. This could be like the thing that you latched onto the most, because this is one of the more unique and exciting, I would say, kind of like narratives for how a documentary can be told. Oftentimes, a lot of documentaries, they'll use, archival footage, which this does, and so it's you might kind of think like, okay, it's does the kind of the same thing. It's going to follow the same beats. We're just going to watch archival footage, and someone's going to narrate, and they're going to tell us what's going on. But what this does is instead of just kind of have a narrator kind of talking over and telling you what's going on throughout the documentary, it's this blend of they have like a lot of, again, just the jazz musicians and the music, and it's the story of kind of jazz at this time and how it is connected into this kind of this greater story. And so you'll get a lot of these montages where it'll kind of cut away and you're watching interviews with musicians, or you're hearing just the music playing for a lot of it. I mean, if you count that as like a music score, this is one of the best, I guess, music scores of the year if you like jazz music. But they do that, and then they intertwine that with, instead of like a narrator, it kind of is cutting away to I'm forgetting what it's called, like APA, is that what it's called? But like the formatting that you had to do for like your essays and stuff, like in high school and in college when you're writing these essays, and if you use like a quote, or if you take something from from like an article or from a book or whatever, and then you have to like quote your source. And so it does a lot of that, where it has like a quote will pop up, and it'll be from either like from a book or from political leaders or just musicians or celebrities or just whoever at the time. If they had some sort of quote that's kind of going on about what specific thing is happening at this moment in the documentary, they'll have the quote kind of flash up, and then it'll have the who said it, kind of the quote down below, citing their source down at the bottom of this. And the first couple times it happens, I was thinking like, ooh, this is really cool, this is a lot of fun, and this is something that, like, is going to make for kind of a upbeat and kind of a, while it is a very serious subject matter, like, again, all of these are, it's going to be told, I could feel like this is going to be told in a little bit more of an upbeat way, and I feel like it's going to have so much style that you can kind of just latch into and sink your teeth into, and like, I feel like this will be widely loved. I think a lot of people like this. I think where Soundtrack to a Coup d'etat kind of falls short for me, and I'm sure for a lot of people, is it is 2.5 hours long. If you didn't know the runtime going in, it probably feels like this isn't ending. Like, because again, it is 2.5 hours. And now I don't mind 2.5 hours. Like, I'm totally fine with sitting on my couch or going to a movie theater and sitting in a seat. And I both times I saw The Brutalist twice in 1 week, and I even just sit through the intermission. Like, I don't need to go out and do anything. Like, I'm totally fine just kind of being in the theater and being immersed. Like, I can sit there for 4 hours and watch something. So the time isn't an issue for me. I think where the time did become a little bit of an issue with me is because it does kind of get a little repetitive, the documentary, where the first couple times where it does this, where it's breaking up the narrative or it's breaking up the story to kind of slice in these quotes, the first couple times you think it's kind of cool. It continues to do this for 2.5 hours, and so you kind of lulls you into this rhythm of, you're watching a couple images, you're watching some things, and some images are maybe not as neatly kind of woven together. It's not quite like a narrative structure where you can see where we got from this scene to this, where we're getting from this bit of archival footage to this interview to this. It kind of is bouncing around a little bit, and then it's also a lot of kind of will intersplice, and we'll kind of put in there these quotes and these either quotes from people or quotes from like a book or whatever. And so it does kind of, it gets you into this rhythm, into this flow, and it does get pretty repetitive. So that was one of the things for me where it just didn't quite work for me. Again, though, I admit that I'm not someone who is super big into documentaries, so I think if you like documentaries and you just like documentary filmmaking, you'll probably love this, and I would recommend you watch this. If you're someone who doesn't watch a lot of documentaries, though, it's kind of one of those I see there's a hard time pitching this to someone, of being like, hey, you want to sit down and watch this kind of experimental or this thing that is 2.5 hours long, and it's got a whole lot of things, and it's, some of it works really well, and some of it doesn't quite mesh. It's kind of, I think, a hard sell for maybe a general audience to turn this on and to watch it. With that said, I will admit, I just wasn't fully bought in or fully invested on the first watch. I did, while I was kind of, as I kind of prepare these videos and put my thoughts and put things, on as I'm typing it all up, I was watching it again. It was in the background, and it was, I was giving it another shot. And yeah, I do think that if I gave this film another shot, and maybe, it'll be months from now, if I, have a day where I can kind of sit down and just really watch it again and try and get fully immersed into it, maybe it'll work a little bit better for me on a second watch. But ultimately, it just didn't quite do it for me on the first watch. So for my personal ranking, I'm putting Soundtrack to a Coup d'etat in fourth, and for my prediction, I'm putting it in fourth. And the final nominee is Sugarcane. An investigation into abuse and missing children at an Indian residential school in Canada ignites a reckoning on the nearby Sugarcane Reserve. This is the first Oscar nomination for Julian Brave Noisecat and Emily Cassie. This is Kellen Quinn's second Oscar nomination. He was also nominated for Best Documentary in 2021 for Time. Sugarcane was also nominated for Best Documentary Direction at the DGA Awards. Now, when I was talking about Black Box Diaries, and I was talking about how that's the one that's like a personal one-on-one story about like one specific person, and I mentioned that there was three others. I'm assuming Porcelain War, obviously just based off of, I haven't seen it, but just based off the description. No Other Land and Soundtrack to a Coup d'etat were all kind of based off or telling a story of a wider group of people, a wider country or race, or different, bigger grand stories. I mentioned, that's what those three are. I mentioned that there was another one that is kind of closer to Black Box Diaries, where it's a little bit more intimate, but it is still a bigger group, and that is Sugarcane, because this is kind of telling the story of a specific group, and this specific, this reserve, the Sugarcane Reserve, and kind of talking about this school and the horrors and things that happened there at this school. This is one for me that is very similar, I would say, to No Other Land, in the sense of there are the moments when you are getting these individual scenes or these individual interviews with people that were affected by the tragic events and what was happening in their childhood at this school, this private school, the residential school that they're going to, and you'll get to hear their stories. And in those moments, your heart, like, this is the documentary that I think made my heart break as much as, No Other Land. In Sugarcane, in these specific interviews, when they're telling their stories and they're, telling what happened to them, I couldn't help but just kind of get very emotional in moments. Like, it is very hard kind of hearing really the horrors of what these people, especially at such a young age, was happening to them. And as the film goes on, it kind of just is getting darker and darker and getting more horrific, and it's the idea of what was happening at this specific this reservation. Everything that was going on here is truly horrifying. And so this is one of those documentaries that, again, none of these documentaries are necessarily easy or fun to watch, but this is one that I think, especially early in the film, does a good job of kind of introducing some of the characters and introducing who the people are. And so you're kind of hooked in, because you immediately have a passion and a love for the people that you're watching this film about. And then as the film goes on, as you get not only the moments where you're hearing about their pasts and things that happened to them at the school, but also as you're getting to kind of establish in present day, establishing the relationships and the connections, and how maybe some of these relationships are a little bit fractured or affected by the events that they had to go through. You kind of are just really, this is a personal story about not as big of a wide of a scale, and not as, like, I guess, intimate as Black Box Diaries, but it's kind of right in the middle, where you've got a big group of people, and it's enough to where you're so personally affected by individual stories of these individual people that are on this reservation, hearing what this experience was like for all of them, how there's one specific scene where I forget her name, but there's a woman who's recounting an experience she had, and the aftermath of that experience, where she something happened to her and she goes to try and report it, and they say, oh, you got to go tell this person. Okay, so she next goes to the next person, so she's trying to report an incident to this next person, and they say, okay, no, you have to go report this to this person. So she says, okay, I'm going to go over here, and she's going to go report it to this person. And at this point, she's trying to report a very serious thing that happened to her, and she's being just kind of tossed around, saying, like, you can't report it, and so it's harder and harder each time to find the courage or find the strength to go report something. And finally she gets to the end, and the last person just tells her to go away, and then tells her dad, and then she faces repercussions at home from her dad because of this experience. So she's a victim of something that happened, and then no one is either believing her or cares or is willing to help this poor girl that has gone through something traumatic. And she talks about how that has, I believe she says that how it turned her to, like, drinking, and turned her into where she just kind of gave up and said, like, okay, no one cares. This is the sad situation that they were in, of even when you're trying to report something serious, no one's listening, no one's caring, and it's just such a hard situation to see, and it's even harder to hear them kind of recount this experience that they had all these years later. So Sugarcane, it is another one of those that, if you like documentaries, this is a very well made and very well edited, and it's a very personal story for the filmmakers to tell this story. But it's again, it's a hard watch, and it's not one that necessarily I would throw on again and have the urge to really rewatch it, but I did appreciate it for the technical, the crafts of the film, and just how well made it really was. So for my personal ranking, I'm putting Sugarcane in third, and for my prediction, I'm putting it in fifth. And that's it. Thank you so much for watching this video. Let me know down below in the comments what you thought of the documentary feature nominees, and let me know what you are rooting for to win if there's a film that you're passionate about. Also, just let me know if there was any film that you would have liked to have seen get in here that maybe got snubbed at the Oscars. And if you would like to like the video and then subscribe to the channel so you don't miss any future episodes in the category breakdown series. I think there's only maybe 2 left at this point, but if you don't want to miss those 2 and you want to subscribe, I would greatly appreciate it, and have a great day.